Hello. Great to be here. I'm delighted to be part of MediaCom's Transformation Week. I think it's the third year now that MediaCom have hosted Transformation Week for all of MediaCom and all of MediaCom's clients. It's a fantastic initiative. It's day 5, so I know that you've had a packed week and a full agenda, and I'm no doubt I've learnt lots. It really has been a fascinating agenda. As per normal, if there are any questions, please email events@mediacom.com and we'll answer them as soon as we possibly can. And all that remains really for me to say to the audience, I guess, is please enjoy this next session. Time for a digital effectiveness reset is a theme, and I guess it is something for us to all think about. But for 2020, I think there's nothing like a global pandemic to prove that we can change if we really need to all of us. I think Mark Reed, the fearless leader of Group M, actually said just a month into the first phase of the lockdown that we'd experienced, certainly in digital, a decade's worth of innovation in that short an amount of time. And I certainly would agree with that from an Ozone project perspective. But pre-COVID, this debate around efficiency versus effectiveness, certainly with digital under the spotlight, was rumbling on for some time. And I'm delighted that we've got two esteemed guests who are at the forefront of that debate, I would say. So we're going to explore as a panel what that effectiveness reset could look like, how that might change advertiser decisions, and then look at the role of the various parties in creating that necessary change. But just by way of introduction, I'm Craig Tuck. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at the Ozone Project, the high attention advertising platform, digital advertising platform, and really happy to say Media Week's current brand of the year. So we're very happy to brag about that whilst we're given license to. Next, I wanted to introduce Orlando Wood. He's a Chief Innovation Officer of System 1. He's the author of a book called Lemon. He's done some recent research as well called Acton, which I'd recommend you all look at. Lemon really was talking to the fact that advertising's brain might have somewhat turned sour, and we might touch on some of those findings through the course of the conversation. Indeed, the one and only Peter Field said about Orlando, the importance of Orlando's research in an increasingly digital marketplace cannot be overstated. So we're really excited to have Orlando with us. It should serve as a massive wake-up call to the armies of digital marketeers who preached the timely and relevant information mantra for the last 20 years and largely rejected the idea of entertaining advertising. I asked for an interesting fact from Orlando. There were too many for us to cover on this call, but one is that, whereas I bought a drill for DIY tasks as part of my midlife crisis, Orlando actually invested in a baby grand piano and is a master pianist.
I wouldn't go that far, Craig, but thank you.
Yeah, paints in watercolor, all whilst helping marketeers navigate the complex world that we operate in. It's good to see that he indeed finds time for a tinkle in amongst all of that work. And then no less, Jane Christian, the head of systems intelligence at MediaCom. And if you don't mind me saying, Jane, hopefully, for 20 years now, has been at the heart of business science for what is consistently one of the most prominent advertising agencies in MediaCom, not just in the UK, but globally. Jane's front and center in bringing that thinking and analysis to clients and clients' work. I think it's right to say you've succeeded so far, but there's lots of work for us all to do, which we'll explore here. And an interesting fact about Jane was she was her school Connect 4 champion, which is really impressive, and bodes well for the role that you do today, I guess, helping marketeers navigate this marketing effectiveness challenge. So without further ado, the first question I wanted to put to you both really was, some would say that digital advertising is broken. Lots of variations upon the meaning of the word broken there. I'd ask both of you, maybe Jane to begin with, do you agree with that statement? Or is there more hope than that statement would have us believe?
I wouldn't say it was broken, but I don't think it's being used in the right ways, would be my view. I think for a long time, the way that because my background is measurements, the way that we've measured digital channels just really isn't up to scratch. And a lot of that stems from the fact that digital channels come with so much data, clicks, impressions, etc., that it's always really tempting just to focus on that data and get really caught up with that data being the be all and end all. But it's really an incredibly short-term view of the actual impact of that activity. And I think that's fine if you've got a really response-focused campaign, and that's what your target is. But anything even remotely longer-term tasks, I don't think as an industry, I think that all the clicks, impressions are all a bit of a red herring, and we're focusing on the wrong things, basically. And I think it's been exacerbated in the last year. I think there's a number of factors behind that. I think there's more of a focus on effectiveness than ever before now. So when people are getting it wrong and focusing on the wrong metrics, it kind of makes me upset that we're not spending budget correctly and maybe just being too short-termist. I think measurement's getting harder of digital because of all the third-party cookie changes, or the death of the cookie, as we hear, are going to make digital attribution as a discipline more harder going forward. And I think as well, one thing that's happened in the pandemic, which is a real big shift, is the shift to so much more e-commerce now. And with e-commerce, inevitably comes more spend on digital. So we've got to get it right. We want to be building brands for the longer term and not just generating some short-term uplift. So from my view, from that measurement perspective, it's a bit broken and misfocused, I would say.
Yeah, great. And Orlando.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Jane, and Peter Field, Les Binet talk about the easier it is to activate, the more you have to do brand building. The more investment you have to put in the brand building work, and as businesses become increasingly digital, and virtual, then you're only one click away from anyone. So you need to have a very strong, distinctive, memorable brand, and that comes through advertising. And unfortunately, advertising has become less and less like that over the last 15 years. And I think it's something to do with the digital world we live in. And, so we've lost in the last 15 years, characters in advertising, things playing out in live time. We've lost music, we've lost referencing of culture more broadly in parody or pastiche. We've lost, things set in the past. We've lost lots of things. And what we've gained in their place is something that's pretty strange, actually. It's sort of lots of fast cut sequences, words on the screen telling us what to think and do, a kind of rhythmic backbeat to everything, and people they're used as props. There's a focus on things. This sort of stuff doesn't hold our attention, it doesn't elicit an emotional response, and it's largely responsible for the drop in advertising effectiveness over the last 15 years, as I show in Lemon. And what we see, I think, in online video advertising has sort of that style has marched into television advertising too, which is really not how television advertising works. And so you've got this sort of new aesthetic that's happened, which has a lot in common with modernist art or even futurism, this focus on things and sort of things broken up into small parts, this fragmentation, which doesn't connect with audiences. And that was the subject of the new piece of work you kindly mentioned earlier, Achtung, where I looked at this, and I looked at the effects of what I call right brain features in online video advertising and left brain features in video advertising. Left brain being those short, sharp cuts, the words on the screen, this kind of frontal stare out at the audience. And the right brain features being more people, live time, character, place, incident. And it was the right brain features that generated these large, big business effects, and the left brain ones, as you say, Jane, that drove that sort of short-term web traffic. But anyway, we could perhaps come on more to that in a minute.
Yeah, no, it is truly fascinating. And I think to expand on that, really, this short-termist kind of rhythm that we've all fallen into, there's an example that comes to my mind in a charity advertiser quite a few years ago, presenting to, I was in digital at that time, presenting to digital, to outdoor, to TV, to radio executives. We all turned up, and the notion was that we would donate some space to support the campaign. And whilst the TV advertising was demonstrated, the outdoor creative was demonstrated, the radio advertising was demonstrated. Upon the lack of digital creative, I asked the question, can we see the digital creative? To which the answer was, well, we're just going to repurpose the outdoor 6-sheet poster for standard digital display. And it's that due consideration not only to the creative and the side of the brain that the creative's appealing to, but also the channel in which the creative's going to appear, that I feel because of the pace that we operate in within digital, we've maybe fallen foul of a little bit. I mean, are there any great examples, Orlando, to that point where I think in Acton you talk about character, incident, place?
I do.
Any
Yeah.
great examples of, maybe brands, or you referenced for people of our generation probably, the Looney Tunes to great effect in the video Acton. Are there any great examples of that you can talk
Yes.
to?
I mean, before I do that, I should just explain that there are different types of attention that the brain brings to bear on the world, and there is very there's goal focused attention, which is very narrow, which is essentially what the left brain, psychologists broadly agree on this, deals with. But then there are other types. There are 4 other types. So vigilant attention, alertness, sustained attention, a divided attention, which are basically dealt with by the right brain. And the right brain is interested in the living, in real places, and how we connect with the world, and it presents the world to us. And so that suggests a certain kind of advertising style. And what you find in these highly effective campaigns, the IPA has data on, is that it is advertising that has character, incident, place that generates these big business effects, the ones that have these right brain features. So, I mean, if you think about it, it's very difficult to describe a lot of advertising today by asking the 3 questions: who's involved, what happens, and where is it set? Because a lot of it is just presented to you as lots of short, sharp cuts with words, on the screen.
Yeah.
Now that's the sort of work that drives these big effects. And one of the examples I give in the Acton film is a campaign for Yorkshire tea, and the way that they bring in characters like Sean Bean, for instance, it's a real character in a real place. And something odd happens. He addresses a workshop, the new starters of the company, and tells them how things are done proper. That has many of these right brain features, the expressions on the faces, the surprise, God, wow, what's going on here? Yes, I think, but I don't know, but I think I quite like it. It's that sort of thing that really sustains attention and generates an emotional response. And the great thing about that campaign is that it has the brand through each of the character, incident, and place. It's clear from the first frame what we're doing, where we are, what's happening. And I think that's a really great example. But there are other examples too, from the Mars stable. I think Eminem's characters do a brilliant job. The thing about characters is that there's no establishing shot required. Once you've established a character, you just go straight in on the character, and you can do it very quickly. Yeah,
no, it's truly effective. And if I'm a great believer in an advertising campaign that runs in digital environments where people are engaged and paying attention. I'm biased, but akin to Ozone project, where our content's full of character, incident, place. It's breaking news. It's lifestyle content from a plethora of leading publishers. It's exactly that. Appeals exactly to the right-hand side of the brain, I would imagine, more so. Jane, from your point of view, this effectiveness versus efficiency conundrum, and all of Orlando's work, and the pandemic and the deprecation of third-party cookies that you mentioned earlier, and the PwC report, which we won't mention again, but we'll mention for this particular point, I guess has led to lots of questions from clients of MediaCom. How are there any examples you can talk to, or an approach that you can talk to for MediaCom where you're helping advertisers pay due credit to, just because someone didn't click on an ad, just because someone didn't post-click or post-impression buy the product, that good advertising in good environments still has an effect in digital? How do you go about dealing with that and helping clients navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously the right measurement technique is key there. Our team traditionally has done a lot of econometric modeling combined with brand health modeling. And what we get from that is moving away from clicks, because I'm not that bothered about how many people click on an ad. In fact, if they might click more when it's in a bad environment and not a particularly good ad, but are they actually going to buy? I'm more interested in what is the incremental effect above all the other channels that are on at the same time on a much further down the line metric such as sales. And that's what econometrics is quite good at doing. That said, econometric modeling alone is still looking at kind of the short to medium term effects of activity. We see even there, digital channels, display, online video working really well, very strongly there. But we also combine that with more long-term brand health analysis. So we want to understand, which brand measures of brand equity, brand health are really important for that particular brand. Is it their value, their quality? Is it about preference? But whatever the measure is, and understanding how media, all channels drive those long-term equity measures and how that ties back to sales. So what we like to present clients with is a kind of short-term ROI on their activity on all channels, including digital, and a longer-term ROI. And it isn't just a matter of the offline channels are better at longer term and aren't short term. That isn't what we see at all. If done well, we see plenty of digital display, online video working really well in the long term if it's the right, as Orlando's saying, the right kind of message. So I just like to move away, like I say, from clicks and move to that much more holistic level playing field measurement.
And that's absolutely one of the things we do at System One is, well, the key thing we do at System One is measure emotional response to advertising to give a kind of long-term prediction, or also a short-term prediction that shows sort of that when you combine it with the sort of extra share of voice model that Les and Peter talked about, and others too, gives you a sense of what will happen over a longer time period. So perhaps 6 months to a year, and it seems to explain something that spend alone just cannot explain, or share of voice alone can't explain. And funny enough, it's all the features I was telling you about: the living and characters and place and incident, all the unexpected, all of those things which are associated with that emotional response. And so in the work we did, in the recent work, Achtung, we teamed up with Facebook, and we looked at 100 ads from campaigns they'd supplied us with, and we measured them for emotional response, and they overlaid this on their own effectiveness data, sales lifts and conversion and so on. And they found that emotional response, as measured by us, explain something that their guidance, their basic essentials principles, their guidance didn't, and that the emotion was helping to predict something in effectiveness terms that their guidance normally it does a good job, but it's not enough. And that's one of the points I'd quite like to make, is that there's been a lot of talk about relevance over the last 15 years. Well, relevance isn't enough. You have to entertain. Relevance is fine if you're only talking to a very targeted audience and you're serving up a product or a service which is going to be of some interest to the people because they're targeted and they're the audience in question. But actually, for these bigger effects, you need to reach many more people, and that means doing something that doesn't assume an interest in the product, which means doing something entertaining. And that's where I think we've got things wrong. And I think actually the ability to target has led us down a creative path that assumes an interest in the product, and the creative itself is no longer doing the job, or
Mm.
that they used to attract attention of a broader audience, to make the brand salient for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So that they might actually look at that brand in the future when it comes to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a client, actually a Group M client, not a MediaCom client, but a Group M client, that said to me, Craig, look, I'm not too bothered if anybody clicks on my online advertising, just the same as I don't expect them to click on a 6-sheet at a bus stop. I just want to know that it's appearing in environments that I deem suitable, and engaging and premium and editorially governed, and that was the long and short of it, really, for that client, and they understood the trade-off. Jane, are many clients that brave, or is there still some way to go?
Some are. I think there's still some way to go. I think where I see things at their worst, this is a bit controversial, is where at the client side you get a digital, like a head of digital, or maybe a head of e-commerce, and you tend to get this very siloed view and a very kind of more, I'd say, old-fashioned view of how digital works, instead of just having that view like you've just said of it doesn't really matter which channel. As if I'm looking to build my brand, I just want to get out there in front of the right people, with the right message and the right environment. So I think a big thing for me would be breaking down those digital only silos within clients, so that we can potentially educate more as well. So of the kind of, it's more general marketing principles. I just don't like this kind of siloed view of digital.
Well, it's something that, I talk about in Lemon, that things have become increasingly specialized in the last 10, 15 years, and things have fragmented. I mean, this is how the left brain tends to operate, and you see it everywhere in all walks of life. But you not only see specialization, but you see standardization and centralization, and all of these things run counter normally to great work. And there's some of the problems we've got to grapple with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased. As I said, I work at the Ozone project. I consider us to have a highly attentive environment for which advertisers can participate in and deploy media in. You have a really strong view on the role creative plays, Orlando, and whereas I was trying to convince you that bad advertising, left brain advertising, can still appear, can still succeed in a right brain environment like the one that Ozone Project has. But you have a view that one without the other is it's best to have both.
I think the context will have of course a part to play, and if you're reading news, and if you're in a particularly goal orientated frame of mind, as you probably are when you're reading the news, then the right content, and it's if it's in the right place, people will look at it, I suspect, for longer. And I think there's quite a lot of work that's been done to show that. But I don't think you can rely on your context to do all the work for you. And I think the creative really needs to be thought about. And I think in the last 10, 15 years, we've talked a lot about the sort of, as I think Mark Ritson put it this way, a lot of the pipe work, but less about the work that goes through the pipe. So I think creative is as he puts it, the second most important thing after your brand size. So in terms of the things you can control, it's the most important thing. So I think we need to focus on the work and refocus on the work, not to say that context isn't important, because of course it is.
Yeah, and I think both of you have referenced that, by not doing both, and certainly not focusing on the work, and brands potentially missing out on the true promise of online, of digital advertising. That's fair to say?
That's absolutely right. That's what I say something similar in the film Achtung, that yes, you can use online video to drive these short-term direct effects. Of course you can, but that is really missing out on advertising's true promise and online's true promise, because what we saw was that this certain type of campaign, this right brain campaign, as I would describe it, is the sort of work that drives these bigger and longer effects.
Yeah, great. Jane, you Group M. I mean, it was a study over 6 months, I think, and 80 plus campaigns. You compiled the research value of quality. Is that still a study for you that holds up with clients, is that helping, I guess, clients understand that they need to pay due consideration to effectiveness, not just efficiency, where digital is concerned?
Yeah, that's the one from a couple of years ago. I think you're saying the one with Group M and Newsworks.
Yeah.
I think, yes, it did at the time. I think that's been one bit of research that's been done. And then I feel like we just need more in that area. And I don't even, I just pulled out a few stats from it earlier just to refresh my memory, because I thought you might ask me about this. Yeah. I mean, it's a great bit of research. You know, it's about across a huge amount of advertising done with Newsworks, and you know, they found things, you know, things that we know, but they were able to quantify the impacts of viewability versus, you know, less viewable positions. And you know, the upshot of the research was really looking at, was it worth paying to be in a quality environment versus just serving somebody at random anywhere, you know, on the internet. And they found a definite answer of yes across all the categories that they looked at. And I remember at the time that being really strong, but I think we need more in this area, because it's all very well and done, and then people revert back to you know, a very programmatic view of, you know, of advertising. I just find the person, it doesn't matter where, and this proved it does.
Yeah, great. It definitely
Karen
does.
Nelson Field has, in her work and her recent book, you know, talks about the importance of context and you know, how for attention. So, you know, how much attention is going to be paid to your advertising in a news feed versus a pre-roll. You know, I mean, it makes a big difference. And various other factors associated with the size of brand, number, and all these things. I think she puts a very good case for you know, how attention can help, measurement of attention can help to explain some of these things. And that's why I was so keen to have an attention component in the latest work I've done. Yeah,
fantastic. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, or almost. Well, I'm sure we could sit here for a long time talking about this. It really is, you know, you've got my attention, and I'm sure the viewers' attention. I was going to summarize, but I don't feel it would do either of you any credit if I did. So I'll just ask one final point, I guess, of both of you. Who would be responsible for this change then? Whose role is it to drive this change? Is it publishers, media owners to surface what they need to surface to give the brand and the agency all of the answers? Is it the brand's responsibility to take responsibility for this? Is it the agencies who sit front and center? Is it the research consultant? You know, who really should be driving this change, leading this debate?
Well, go on, Jane, you go.
I think, as you allude to, it's kind of everybody. I think what the media owners can do working with, you know, good research partners is give us that view of, you know, like the Group M work do with Newsworks, being able to prove the value of things like quality there. I think advertisers, I know, going back to my point earlier, I think they need to set themselves up so that digital is not a silo, and that you've got people looking across all marketing and looking for its full and long-term effect, and not falling down that let's follow the clicks, you know, corner. And I think it's agencies, because ultimately agencies should be advising advertisers, but there needs to be pressure from one to the other and mutual acceptance to do that.
Yeah, great. Orlando, final words.
I think, you know, it's incumbent on all of us. What I tried to do is to look at some of these problems through the lens of the creative itself. And I think when you start to look at at things through the lens of the creative, then you start it actually helps to simplify things quite a lot. And you start to learn that good creative principles are good creative principles. And that, you know, as I say, you know, relevance isn't enough. You have to entertain. And I'm hoping that you know, that it will help everyone point in the same direction. That's what I hope.
Yeah, Fantastic. And for me, it is truly everybody's responsibility to work together. It's a huge change shift that needs to occur. And we should all just remember there's a real person at the other end of the line, and we shouldn't lose sight of that fact, really. But thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry it was so short. Maybe we can do it again sometime. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But thank you again.
Having me.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.